Beginning of 1940. The heads of all European states are well aware that after the rapid defeat of the Polish army, Germany will not stop there, and therefore Europe will face a new big war. In the current situation, the Scandinavian countries, namely Sweden, Denmark and Norway, are trying with all their might to maintain their neutrality, which they have adhered to since the mid-19th century. It was obvious that, due to their geographical location, the Scandinavian countries would not be able to remain completely neutral if a new world war broke out, but at the same time, the governments of these states made every effort to stay away from the new military conflict, but their efforts did not bring the desired result. On May 31, 1939, Denmark, hoping to avoid an attack by the German army, signed a non-aggression pact with Germany. Similar proposals were made to Norway and Sweden, but the governments of these states, deciding that the absence of a land border with Germany ensured their security, refused. Despite the fact that a non-aggression pact between Germany and Norway was never signed, Norwegian ports received German warships, and German submarines managed to sink several British merchant ships in Norwegian territorial waters by the end of 1939. In this situation, in January 1940 the British Foreign Office announced that it planned to extend the conduct of the war to Norwegian territorial waters. In case Norway entered the war on the side of Germany, the British command developed a plan to seize Norwegian ports, as well as establish control over local mines in order to deprive the German industry of ore supplies. At this time, the German plan for the invasion of France fell into the hands of the French command, so the French, in order to gain additional time for preparation, were interested in diverting the forces of the German army, and, therefore, supported the plans of the British command. Soon the British government publishes an extensive list of goods that qualify as military contraband. If this list was adopted, Norway would immediately lose a significant part of its exports to Germany. Since in such a scenario the Norwegian budget would have lost the lion's share of its income, the Norwegian government refused to accept Britain's demands to combat military smuggling and tried with all its might to maintain neutrality. As for the German command, they understood perfectly well that over time, pressure from Great Britain and France on Norway would produce results and Germany would lose a convenient transit route for Swedish ore, without which the German military industry would not be able to function normally. Therefore, back in December 1939, the German command began to develop a plan to establish control over Norway, which was called Weserubüng, which can be translated from German as training on the Weser. Initially, the German command planned to begin the invasion of Norway simultaneously with the offensive on the Western Front, so they wanted to use only General Dietl's Mountain Division and several reserve regiments for combat operations against the Norwegian army, but plans changed. Having decided that it was necessary to establish control over Norway before launching an offensive on the Western Front, the German command allocated 6 divisions for the operation: the 69th, 169th, 196th, 181st and 214th Infantry and 3rd Mountain Rifle. It was also decided to establish control over Denmark in order to supply the German group in Norway through its territory. To establish control over Denmark, it was planned to use the 170th and 198th Infantry Divisions, as well as the 11th Motorized Brigade. To transport the paratroopers, it was planned to use warships, since they had a higher speed than transport ones, and German aviation was supposed to provide cover for the fleet, as well as an airborne landing. According to the drawn-up plan, the German army needed to establish control over the cities of Bergen, Narvik, Trondheim, Kristiansand and Stavanger, and by capturing Oslo, capture the King of Norway along with the government and force them to sign surrender. In Denmark, the German army planned to follow a similar plan, which involved capturing key cities and forcing the local government to capitulate. At this time, the Allies developed their own action plan, called R4, which involved mining Norwegian territorial waters in order to force German ships with ore to move further from the coast and thereby come under attack by the Anglo-French fleet. The Allied command also planned to land troops in the city of Narvik and, having established control over it, take positions near the Swedish border, thus depriving Germany of access to the main transport route for Swedish ore. By the beginning of active hostilities, Germany had a relatively small group with a total number of 122,100 soldiers, which was quite enough to complete the task, since the number of the Norwegian army was only 55,000 soldiers, and the Allies planned to use a group of a similar size in this theater of operations. Therefore, the German army was opposed by no more than 110,000 soldiers. The fact is that the Allies had a much more powerful fleet, which was supposed to allow the German landing force to land in Norway, as well as destroy German transport ships. German ships with a landing force that was supposed to establish control over the cities of Trondheim and Narvik went to sea on April 3, 1940. Meanwhile, by the evening of April 8, the 170th Infantry and 11th Infantry Divisions of the Germans were concentrated in the vicinity of the Danish-German border. Operation Weserubüng began on April 9 at 4 a.m., when German warships almost simultaneously entered the bays of the Norwegian cities of Narvik, Trondheim and Bergen. At the same time, the city of Stavanger was attacked by German dive bombers. In Narvik, the German fleet acted very successfully, sinking 2 Norwegian battleships that were guarding the bay, and the Germans landed troops in the port. Realizing that resistance was useless, the head of the Narvik garrison, after a conversation with the commander of the German landing force, was forced to capitulate. In Trondheim, the Germans were also lucky. After landing at 6 a.m., the Norwegian garrison capitulated. The garrison of Bergen, after the German landing, tried to put up resistance, which still could not be called fierce. Nevertheless, the Germans managed to completely break the resistance of the Norwegian garrison and establish control over Bergen only by 12 noon. After establishing control over Narvik, Trondheim and Bergen, German ships left the bays of the captured cities and headed for the German coast. Meanwhile, the garrison of Stavanger was subjected to massive bombardment all morning. After the Germans managed to suppress the Norwegian anti-aircraft batteries, paratroopers landed in the vicinity of the city. Very soon, without encountering serious resistance, the German paratroopers quickly established control over the city and the nearby airfield. German ships entered the Bay of Kristiansand at 6 a.m., but were immediately attacked by coastal artillery. Since the dense artillery fire of the Norwegian coastal batteries did not allow the German troops to land on the shore, it was decided to call in aviation for help. German aircraft began bombing the Norwegian batteries and by noon they were suppressed. After which the German landing began. The city of Kristiansand itself fell into German hands only at 5 p.m. The German army was successful, but the squadron that was sent to capture the Norwegian capital had problems. The squadron commander did not expect that the Norwegians would dare to put up serious resistance, so he sent his ships through the narrowest point of the Oslofjord, the Dribak Passage, to land troops in the port of Oslo. At 5:20 a.m., the guns of Fort Oscarsborg opened fire on the leading German heavy cruiser Blücher. Despite the damage received, the German cruiser continued to move and was destroyed by camouflage torpedo tubes. The remaining German ships abandoned attempts to pass through the Dribak Passage and landed troops on the shore. Only in the evening did German aircraft suppress the Norwegian coastal batteries, after which on the morning of April 10 Oslo fell into the hands of the German army. Despite the fact that the Germans took Oslo, the Norwegian king and government managed to leave the city, and, therefore, they could not be forced to sign surrender. The German invasion of Denmark began at the same time as the invasion of Norway. At 5:25 a.m. the German divisions crossed the border and began moving deeper into Jutland. Aviation began a massive bombing of Danish airfields. Very soon the 11th German Rifle Brigade was able to establish control over the city of Skagen. The 19th German Division went to sea on the night of April 9th, which allowed it to land on the coast of Zealand early in the morning. By that time, German paratroopers were able to establish control over the bridge between Falster and Zealand, greatly simplifying the capture of the island, which the German army occupied quite quickly without encountering serious resistance. Simultaneously with the establishment of control over Zealand and Jutland, an operation to capture the Danish capital took place. At 5:20 a.m., the motor ship Hanseatic city of Danzig with the 308th German Infantry Regiment on board entered the port of Copenhagen. After landing ashore, the Germans rode bicycles to the Copenhagen citadel and began a shootout with local guards. Already at 7:20, the Danish king Christian X gave the order to stop resistance, realizing its futility. By the morning of April 10, all of Denmark, as well as the largest cities in Norway, were under the control of the German army. And if Denmark signed the surrender, then the Swedish army, led by the king, tried to resist. On April 14, the Allies began active action. They landed in the vicinity of the cities of Harstad and Namsos and, teaming up with Norwegian divisions, tried to counterattack the German army. Allied divisions that landed near Harstad attacked the city of Narvik, the German garrison of which, although small in number, offered fierce resistance. Meanwhile, on April 17, a British landing force landed in the city of Andelsens, which, together with the troops that had landed earlier in Namsos, attempted to counterattack the advancing German army. A counter-battle between the Allied army and German divisions took place in the vicinity of the cities of Lillehammer and Steinkjer. Thanks to the active actions of German aviation, the Allied attack quickly fizzled out. In the current situation, they were forced to retreat to the coast and take up defensive positions, since the Allies were unable to resume the offensive without additional forces. Meanwhile, in the north, the Allies were lucky. Thanks to the dominance of the Anglo-French fleet at sea, the German garrison of Narvik could not receive reinforcements and ammunition. Thus, already on May 12, the Anglo-French troops managed to establish control over the northern part of Narvik and continue to push back the German troops. Already on May 28, under the pressure of the Allies, the Germans had to completely abandon the city and retreat to the West Fjord. It would seem that there were still chances to prevent the surrender of Norway, but at this time the Allied army suffered a crushing defeat in France. On June 4, the Allied evacuation from the Dunkirk area ended and therefore the Anglo-French troops in Norway also received orders to hastily evacuate. Together with the Allied army, the Norwegian king and his government left Norway. Already on June 16, the entire Norwegian army surrendered and Germany managed to establish complete control over the country. This completed the Danish-Norwegian Wehrmacht operation. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click on the bell so you don't miss new videos.